Good evening and welcome to FountainHead Rhode Island's Fall Educational Panel and Networking event here at the Providence Public Library, focusing on leadership in the life science space. My name is David Almonte. I'm one of the co-founders of FountainHead Rhode Island. For those who may not be familiar with our organization, we host educational panel and networking events like the one here tonight, as well as host live community spotlights, fireside chats, and recently hosted one of the largest climate leadership events in New England. What began as a small idea has grown into a nationwide community of 1,500 plus business and community leaders, and this year we're honored to celebrate our 10th anniversary together. For most of us, we attend these events in the hope that we can spend some time together to learn, connect, and grow as individuals, organizations, and business and community leaders, and tonight we'll do just that. Before we get into tonight's program, I want to just take a moment to share a quick message, one that had me thinking about everything going on in the world around us today, as we prepare to dive into the topic of leadership tonight in an incredibly important industry. A few weeks ago, I shared a post on LinkedIn that it seemed as though we've forgotten how to simply talk to one another, to have constructive debate for the sole purpose of learning, growing, and better understanding our peers. Having civil dialogue, especially when we don't see eye to eye, is one of the most powerful tools we have for growth. It's also a hallmark of true leadership, no matter the industry. It's perfectly okay to disagree or see things differently, because that's often where the real learning begins. When we approach those moments with curiosity, we open the door to deeper understanding and shared progress. That reflection reminded me why FountainHead Rhode Island exists. This community embodies what's possible when passionate leaders come together, not to agree on everything, but to learn from one another, to grow together, and to expand our perspectives. That's who we are, and that's what tonight's all about. Because just like in the life science space, progress doesn't come from standing still. Leadership is about experimentation, discovery, and a relentless pursuit of understanding, not just of data or results, but of people, purpose, and possibility. Events like the one here tonight don't just happen. They take a lot of work, coordination, and support. I want to thank our board of directors, our advisory committee members, the staff here at the Providence Public Library, our elected officials in attendance, in addition to our year-long community partners and special event sponsors for making this evening possible. Our 2025 year-long sponsor at the silver level is Partridge Snow and Hahn LLP, and at the bronze level, Bank Newport. Our special event sponsors tonight include Recovery Friendly Workplace, which is our presenting sponsor, the Rhode Island Life Science Hub, and Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. As a side note, if you parked in the garage located next door, we have a number of parking passes to offset the cost of attending tonight's event, and we want to thank Dr. Turco and the Rhode Island Life Science Hub for making that possible. To get things moving tonight, I want to welcome to the stage, representing our presenting sponsor, Jeffrey Wolfsberg, Program Director of Recovery Friendly Workplace, to say a few words. Please help me welcome Jeff to the stage.
Typically don't like sitting behind podiums, but I have a few minutes to say hello. Welcome to this event. I hope you have a wonderful evening. We are the presenting sponsor, and I work for BHDDH, which is a mouthful, if you spell it all out: behavioral healthcare, developmental disabilities, in hospitals. I do a lot of public speaking, and the one thing that I learned a long time ago is that within the first 20 seconds, you need to convince your audience why they should listen to you. Right now, throughout workplaces throughout Rhode Island, there are people struggling every day when they go into work with a mental health issue. The statistics tell us something very clear. 1 in 5 people in any workplace seriously consider leaving their job because of a mental health struggle. When we look at all the people that are struggling with substance use disorders, 70% of them are employed full-time. So why should you listen to me? Because I'm probably the most important person you can meet tonight, or maybe even email this week, because every time I do these quick introductions, I, for some reason, think about that movie with Liam Neeson, Taken. Do you know that movie? Right? He had that famous speech, right? He goes, "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. I don't have any money, but I do have a set of skills that I've honed over a long career." That's me. I've honed a set of skills over a long career that will help you in your workplace become more confident and more clear about addressing employees with mental health struggles and substance use disorders. The benefit of that is that when you adopt the principles and practices of recovery-friendly workplace, your retention goes way up. You keep talent, you attract talent as well with the recruiting practices, potentially lowering healthcare costs, reducing absenteeism, depending on your industry, like construction, lowering incidents of injury or accidents. There are so many advantages to becoming a certified recovery-friendly workplace. I really hope all of you over the coming weeks find my name and number somewhere in the materials tonight. Reach out to me and have me visit your office. One of the great things about our program, it is completely funded, so there's no cost to you. But let me come in, sit down with you, and explain how we can help your business create a much more healthy environment where employees feel what the term we use a lot these days, psychologically safe. Okay? Have a wonderful evening, and I just enjoy yourself learning tonight.
Thank you, Jeff, for your leadership and your support. Please make sure to take some time to say hello to Jeff. Just thank you for all the work that you're doing in the communities around Rhode Island. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to our esteemed panel and our incredible moderator, Michelle Muscatello, Vice President of Communications and External Affairs at Delta Dental of Rhode Island. Michelle and team, I will turn it over to you to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Looking forward to tonight's discussion and just really honored to be up here on stage with Jessica, Mark, and Mukesh to talk about leadership in the life sciences. We have a lot that we want to get to and talk about, so I want to kind of jump right in to some of the questions that we've developed, but also leave some time for you to ask questions at the end too. So I think it'll be a great conversation, and we'll let all of you introduce yourselves as we ask and answer the first question. So what does true leadership look like to you? And how has your idea of leadership evolved and changed through the course of your career? And Jessica, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. How are you? Nice to see you. My name is Jessica Kaplan. I am an executive coach. I was most recently at Clear Rock. My colleague is here, a woman-owned executive coaching and outplacement firm focusing predominantly with life science clients as well as higher education. However, it is my second week at a new job. So learning is a key right now for me. And I don't really even remember my name at this point. I'm learning all the acronyms, but I'm currently an executive coach at Boston Consulting Group for their own employees, our own employees. So, can you ask the question again?
Yes, so the question, see? But this is all flexible. You know, what does leadership look like to you? And it's constantly evolving, right? Your idea of what leadership is. So can you sum it up? Is it easy to do?
Well, actually, I think you just said something. It's constantly evolving what leadership is. I think that actually is an important point of view. I think a lot of people talk about leadership like it's a title, right? Or it's a fixed goal. I want to be a leader. But the idea of leadership actually being something that evolves. Leadership, if you think about looking up leadership in the Google or whatever, there's so many definitions. How many people work at an organization with leadership-based competencies? Do you know what they are? Sometimes you know how many there are? There's usually like 10, 15, or no one knows them, right? But the idea is, to me, leadership is knowing who you are, knowing what values ground you, figuring out and being curious about what the situation needs at that time, and finding ways to flex in an authentic way to meet the situation's needs, and helping others connect with what the situation needs based on their values so that together we move forward. Because you can't force adults to do anything. I can't force my 11-year-olds to do anything, never mind adults, right? You have to figure out how to get everyone marching to the same way. And that's what's evolved for me. I used to think it was a fixed thing. I wanted to be a leader, and I didn't realize that it's an ever-changing goal and journey.
the great start, right, to our questions and answers. And Dr. Mark Turco, you are in one of the key leadership roles here in the state of Rhode Island right now, in a sector that we've all put a lot of heart, soul, and hope into. So tell me what you think leadership means, just as an overall, and then we'll get more specific into life sciences. And you can tell the crowd a little bit about yourself, though I'm guessing most are aware.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. And I do want to just step back for a second and congratulate the FountainHead group and all the folks here today. I mean, forums like this where we can actually have dialogue, meet, socialize a bit, and network, incredibly valuable, especially in the times that we're living in that are difficult for people. So I Jason and David and so forth. I have to be nice to David because his father's on my board, and so but I do have to give a shout out to David, and also want to welcome all of the dignitaries as well here. Mayor Smiley has been a huge supporter of our efforts here in Providence and doing a great job in building out the city of Providence. So getting to leadership, and again, we spoke about this prior to the panel discussion, is that leadership is not specific just to the life science, obviously. So, I view leadership really as being that person that sets the fidelity of the mission. It's always about the mission. And for me as a leader, I have to basically set that strategy and be very clear and focused with my team with regards to what our mission is, and then really stay true to that mission. You can change the strategy if you need to and make pivots, but you should always be mission driven and have a vision and set that out for your team. And that's what good leaders, I think, try to do over their time. Without a mission, you can't bring people together, you can't develop strategies, and you can't look at the resources that you need, because all your resources and all your efforts need to be driven toward that mission. So I think that's one component of what leadership is. Obviously, there are many pieces of leadership, and I'm sure we'll discuss some of them, but the mission is critically important.
Thank you. And Dean Mukesh Jain, thank you for being here, and want you to be able to tell a little bit about yourself and your idea of leadership and how it's evolved as you've taken on the role here at Brown University.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. Great to see so many familiar faces, and I just echo everything Mark said. Thanks to Fountainhead and all of you for taking time out. So I, just as a way of background, I've been in Rhode Island now 3.5 years in my role at Brown University. Before that, spent a long time in Cleveland, 15 years doing a whole bunch of different things in the academic space. And prior to that, spent a lot of time in the Harvard system where I trained and was on faculty at the Brigham and Harvard Medical School. So with respect to leadership, I used to think the leadership was, and this dovetails a fair bit with Mark's comment, but I used to think of it as just you set a vision and a mission and then you walk away. This was a long time ago. I've gotten a little more thoughtful since then. But I look at it today as a leader is someone who has the clarity to set that mission and articulates it. Mm-hmm. Number 2, so clarity. The second is courage, the courage to own it, because there's always ups and downs. And then finally, conviction to see it through, because we all know doing big things, the kind of work Mark is trying to do and Relish, takes a sustained commitment to that effort. So my leadership team is tired of me talking about clarity, courage, and conviction, but it's something that I always go back to. The other aspect of leadership, just 2 words that I always try to keep in mind, is trust and control. You must establish trust with your team, within your institution, and it's foundational for partnerships, right? None of us can do stuff alone. So that trust is absolutely essential to everything you do as a leader. And then there's control. It is very easy to want to control everything. And it is amazing what you can achieve if you just let go of control a little bit. And you need it. You need to let go of control for your leadership team to do the best that they can be. You need that in your partnerships with the external community to achieve whatever your mission is. So again, clarity, courage, conviction, and two other words, trust and control. That's where I am on leadership. I love your comment, Jessica. I've done all these leadership competency. I can never remember any of them.
No one can remember that.
Yeah, and so thank you for saying that. That's what I've distilled it down to, Jessica.
So I think all of us have mentioned career pivoting, and Jessica's going through it right now. And Mark and Mukesh, you've pivoted in your careers from clinical to leadership now. And when you think about leading in life sciences, what are the differences that you see that are needed to be successful in life science leadership compared to some of the other roles that you've had?
So let me start on that question, because and one, you and I spoke just prior about, in my mind, the importance of pivoting in your careers, because if you stay in any one focused direction for 30, 40, 50 years, at some point, you do need a challenge in life. And when you do pivot, you basically are faced with a lot of challenges. I would, and I'm going to distill it down, Mukesh just articulated very well certain words, and we can take words home. But for me, in the pivots that I've made, going from, for example, clinical medicine to industry, which is incredibly different and very hard to do, the word would be you have to learn how to influence. And that is key. You cannot go in and try to demand something change. And that was a hard lesson, actually, for me, coming from the clinical side, where when I'm running my lab and having my team there and we're taking care of a patient that is ready to die and we're trying to do our thing, I basically say, I need this, I need that, X, Y, or Z. In the business world, it's much more about leadership by influence. And I think that is one of the key lessons that I've tried to learn. I need to continue to learn. As Jessica said, leadership is always evolving, because I'm not sure I do the best job at influencing today. And I need to work on that over time. So that would be my word, if we chose one word.
So I that is great, and I don't know if I can add much, but I'll just add a little flavor from a different perspective, particularly in the life sciences. The life sciences industry is really complicated, and it's different than a lot of other industries. First of all, and if you think about sort of the life cycle in the life sciences, sorry for the redundant use, but science is complicated. Innovation takes a long time in the life sciences, so it's different than other industries. That patience is really, really important as a leader, and keep your team and others to recognize that and acknowledge that. Then there's enormous regulatory hurdles in bringing life sciences technologies to fruition. And then there's disseminating and getting that uptake in the community amongst practitioners. So it is an extremely complicated cycle. And throughout that cycle, and I'll build up Mark's comment, he's absolutely right. Each of those you can't do alone. You're partnered with government or in academia, industries. And it is, you have to influence, you have to build trust with your partners to be successful. And I think that is a very different skill set than exactly what Mark said. We were the same way, and we happen to be both cardiologists, so we have some similar phenotypes as well. And I think that's what I would say. The only other comment, Jessica, and I'll be quiet after this, is people do training. Sorry, Michelle, but I wanted to reference Jessica for a second. Is people talk about leadership training, but I got to tell you, there is a time and place in your career to be a leader. And I sometimes worry, we have people that are straight out of medical school and they're taking leadership training in the residence, actually learn how to take care of a patient or do something before you start to think about being leaders. That there's a time and a place to be a leader. And Jack Welch, and I'm going to paraphrase, said something to the effect, there's a time where you invest in yourself. And then there's a time, and that time is not when you're a leader because you're building yourself, you're investing in yourself. It's when you can let that go and you're ready to serve and invest in others. That's the time to be a leader. And that's really important to remember to folks that are thinking about, are earlier in their careers and are thinking of pivoting or taking on leadership roles. Remember, there's a right time and place for that opportunity.
It feels like every industry is facing a tremendous amount of uncertainty and change right now, thinking about the future. And I would say life sciences is facing those same headwinds. So when you think about your team and building future leaders among your team, how do you train them and lift them up to have that adaptability and resilience in today's day and age and with all that you face in the life sciences every day? And Jessica, let's start with you with maybe what skills do you tell emerging leaders that they need to have?
Resilience is a word that I struggle with a little bit. Resilience actually means having some sort of challenge and then springing back into form. But into form kind of denotes that you want to go back to a normal. You want to go back to what it used to be. And I actually think more than ever, that idea of emerging and leadership's constantly emerging, everything in our world is emerging, right? Our climate is emerging in different ways or changing, evolving. So this idea, first of all, for emerging leaders is to think about what is it like to constantly be learning and look at it like that resilience is ongoing learning. The growth mindset is used often, right? The idea that a mistake is an opportunity to grow. I was an HR business partner in healthcare and remember very clearly, but tell me if I'm wrong, that magnet status for a hospital, people actually needed to be able to admit mistakes. That was one of the pieces of being able to admit mistakes because the ability to admit mistakes was directly correlated to our morbidity rates, right? Is that true? Is it more or less? Okay, good. Yes. But I remember that, it's actually life or death, the ability to say, I don't know how to do this. I made a mistake. That to me is resilience. And that is what we need. I'm trying to teach my 11-year-olds the same thing, right? It's okay that you made a mistake. What can you learn moving forward? Not what you did in the way back. It's called feed forward. Feedback brings you stress. Feed forward. So for emerging leaders, how do you bring this lesson forward with you? I think that's a huge piece, is reframing what resilience is. And that way we don't judge ourselves for feeling like, oh, I messed that up. No, it's, well, I'll do better next time. Or that feeling of, I just wish we could go back to what it used to be. That's a waste of energy. It's a lot in your head. I, as a coach, hear all that all the time. I just want to go back. I think our leaders need to lead with that idea of forward and learning constantly.
No, Jessica, and that's really powerful. I think the concept of being willing to take risk and then failing, that is something that's missing in to some extent, and that we need to make sure we keep educating that it's okay to fail. And you take those lessons and you learn those lessons. And what I've tried to preach to my teams when I'm running a medical device company or in this current role, it's okay if we fail. Let's fail fast and let's take those lessons and go on to do what we need to do to remediate. But I'm going to use another word that I think, again, many people struggle with. I've struggled with it over time. And, everyone in this room is a high performer. There's no one that's here on a Thursday night at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock that's not a high performer. Everybody's a high performer. But what do we struggle with? We struggle with living in ambiguity. How do we live in ambiguity? And especially in the environment that we're in today, where there's so much change, where tomorrow morning we're going to wake up and something coming from Capitol Hill is going to be different than it was today. How do we deal with that? We have to learn to live in ambiguity, and that is one of the toughest things for high performers, is to live in ambiguity. So would be my lesson to folks.
I would think particularly so in life sciences too, where you start on a path and you want to see something to completion, and yet you're constantly facing roadblocks and things that went a different way than you anticipated it going.
I don't really have an answer, because in higher education, there's no uncertainty or challenges currently, so it's a bit of a walk in the park. But if you force me to answer, right, I'll pretend there are challenges. And I love the comment. In some ways, I think about what Jessica and Mark said. And you have to have an adaptability or flexibility in ambiguity. And so just using 2025, some of you may know Brad went through a challenging period, so I'll just use that ambiguity, that uncertainty was really, really challenging. And Jessica, you asked, how do you lead your team with young people during that challenge? And what I would say is, as you're thinking about how you adapt to the situation and be flexible, you have to still keep your mission in mind, right? So as a university, two things, and that takes primary importance over everything: education and was second. That's it. But when we distill all of it down to its core essence, that's what it is. Focus in times of ambiguity and challenge on your core mission. There are mission critical and mission adjacent areas, and you've got to focus on the mission critical, and that's what we huddled around for months and months. Mission critical. Number two, you've got to get buy-in from your team. You have to be honest with them. You have to support them. And you have to communicate with your team and the broader audience, the broader ecosystem. And there is no substitute for the amount of communication. In fact, I think it's impossible to over-communicate during times of challenge and uncertainty. And I hope that by having gone through this, and we did it as a team and we did okay, I believe it prepares us for the next challenge. So there's resilience, there's flexibility, because you don't want to go back, as Jessica said, to exactly the same. You have to evolve, you have to adapt, you have to live with ambiguity, but you've got to maintain your eye on your core mission.
Michelle, can I just add up one point that, Mukesh gave you the academic side. If we purely look at life science innovation, one of the things, and this goes back to being true to the mission, we have to tell as leaders, our team, where the line is. And we always want to move fast. We want to get things done. We have to push forward. But the line is always, we are never going to compromise on quality or compliance, because the devices or the drugs or the cell and gene therapy that we're working on is going into your mother, your father, your sister, whoever. Quality is the key. And then compliance. We have to go through regulatory compliance and all the other avenues of compliance. And as long as we stay true to that mission of quality and compliance on the innovation side, everything else will take care of itself.
So how does leadership then bridge that gap between what's happening in the labs or what's happening at the medical school to the commercialization and making sure that these breakthroughs actually make it to market? So that whole life cycle of, starting a new innovation and seeing it through.
You want to take?
Nobody wants to be the first one to take this one.
All right, I'll answer that as opposed to just kind of taking you through the life cycle. I will bring up the concept that, and this is, I hate to go back to Steve Jobs and the old Apple days, but I do think it's important to remember one key lesson that he taught many of us, which is it's never about the drug, device, or any particular product. It's about the purpose. And so to take something from inception through to commercialization, you have to be true to the purpose and really stay, clear to that and state that with your teams and the outside world as well. That's really, and you mentioned KPIs. When I tell my team and give them their KPIs, the most important KPI is to understand the purpose of what we're doing. And if they understand the purpose, they're smart enough people, whether they're in R&D or whether they're in the lab or whether they're marketing people or product managers, whatever position they may be in, as long as they understand that, they will move it through the life cycle, and ultimately that will come to market, if everything else comes true.
I like that idea that you said of remembering that there's a human behind all of it too, and how impactful that is when you break it down to this could be your mother, your father, your child, someone that you love.
When I was at Medtronic, we went out. We had plants all over the world, and we would go to plants outside the United States, and basically we would bring patients that had implants and say, look, you're not just on the line manufacturing a product, this is where that product is going, and bring it back to the patient. And again, if you stay true to that, ultimately everything else will play out okay.
Having the opportunity to sit like this with you both, I love that it's kind of a lot of this, right? The bigger picture. And, everyone uses the jargon of North Star and all that. But if you actually think what a North Star is, it's big enough and high enough that it can orient a whole, right, Earth, right, all of humanity. So you need a purpose that is big enough, that is high enough, right, but that resonates enough, that's tangible, that mother, and I think that is what, when you go through when people are experts, there's a fine line between being an expert and expecting yourself to be perfect. I get to talk to the inner voices of experts, right, as a coach, and this idea that I need to know everything, right, in my domain. It can almost be like I need to have it all figured out. I need to be perfect. It's an interesting, almost just a leaning into expertise a little bit too much. And when I bring that up, because if we each have our domains, then actually our focus becomes a little bit smaller. But as the leader, if you can say, yes, we all have our expertise, but what are we all here for, right? And I was just, has anyone get seasick? I promise this has a point. I know I just went. But I just realized that when I'm like, if you're seasick and you look as the farthest point out, right, you actually stop kind of getting seasick. But as soon as you see the waves in front of you, or even anything close, like anything that's fixed, other than the horizon, that's when you start to get nauseous. So I think it's an important metaphor, but and then the one other thing I want to say is I've sat in the audience, and then I think this is all great, but have you been to my work? Do you know how hard it is to get anyone to sit down and think about anything? But I think what I get to do as a coach is realize that you have to slow down to be intentional. So if it just has to happen, we have to take time to say, what are we here for? Are we on track? Like you said, having those meetings, because it's the only way to actually get things done. Otherwise, people are going to be doing all different things. No one's going to be doing it, and you have to clean up the mess anyway. So again, orienting, checking in, bigger picture, understanding how people connect with that mission, but finding the time to do it and saying no to other things, because that has to happen first. Otherwise, you're going to be cleaning it up anyway, in my opinion.
You got a fresh battery, right, in your microphone, so.
Yeah.
Is that a metaphor?
Sorry if you didn't hear anything before, but I don't have much to add. I mean, I think it's been stated beautifully.
I think we've been talking a lot about the challenges of being a leader, but I really want to know what gets you excited about being a leader in today's day and age. So let's start with you, Mukesh.
Sure. I would say it's the opportunity for impact. Mm-hmm. It ultimately, and maybe you start to think more about that as you get older. I thought about impact in a different way. And when I was earlier in my career, and that was still a little bit more self-focused because I was still building my career. But now it's about impact. And frankly, coming to Brown and Rhode Island provided that opportunity. There were a lot of lessons in different things that I did over the course of my career that I thought there was an opportunity to bring it all together in a community that if a few things fell into place, there was an opportunity to build an integrated, comprehensive ecosystem that could really take innovations, drive them to fruition, assess them in an ecosystem where those innovations, if assessed and if impactful, could be scaled to nation and globe. And that was sort of the dream. And I felt like there was an opportunity here. A lot of stuff had to fall into place. Thankfully, it has fallen into place, and here we are. But it's that opportunity for impact that still is central to getting up every day. It's that impact.
Yeah, first, I do want to make sure that everyone in the audience knows that Dean Jain, in his day, was one of the most amazing scientists. His lab was one of the key labs, and he is a true scientist at heart. And I love that he's in the administrative role now, but we have to keep in mind all of the great science and work that he did in the lab in his day. But and it's along the same lines. I think what excites me as a leader in this field of innovation and life science is that we can make tremendous impact. And you have to have the conviction in innovation that you can make that impact. And you have to be bold about it. If we just sit back and let it come to us, it's not going to happen. We truly need to be bold in our conviction, and innovation can change the world. Some of you probably, heard me say before that, we now have cures for sickle cell. We can treat cystic fibrosis, and we have many more things coming down the pike with immunotherapies and the ability to treat solid tumors and liquid tumors and cure disease now that we've never had before. So we're truly in an amazing time of innovation. Yeah, things are screwed up, at the federal level and elsewhere, but we will solve those problems over time, and we need to keep focused, and that's what we have to do as leaders, is to keep our focus in driving the innovation and making the difference in the world that we need to make.
I would think, as we talked a little bit about the relationships that you have to be constantly forging with different stakeholders in life sciences, a word that came to mind when you're talking about all of this innovation was patience. How do you get all of those different stakeholders to have the patience to stick with you?
Well, I think those stakeholders all have a common goal. And in the life sciences, it's to impact human health. And so I think that is really important as in these partnerships to remind folks. That's one. And number two, always keeping in mind in any relationship that it has to be a win-win. Really, really important. Always put yourself in the shoes of the other individual. And that goes if you're partnering with government, with industry, or it's a multi-faceted partnership. There has to be a win-win for everyone because we all have a shared goal, and that's the only way we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think, one of the things that I try to say to individuals and folks on my teams are that you have to be patient, but also have that sense of urgency. And it's dealing with that trade-off of patience versus urgency to ultimately get, things done. And that's sometimes, again, very difficult. And the old adage of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, that's not something that a lot of younger generations are used to. And we need to get people and keep our teams, especially in this space and in the times that we're living, comfortable being uncomfortable.
It's funny, I always say, I want to kind of have a PR agent for change because I think that discomfort is actually a sign of learning and growth. So it's like, I want to get comfortable with the discomfort in order to learn and grow. It's just like a side effect of learning and growth. Like they say the road to fulfillment is lines with your own self-criticism, like just, a lot of angst, right? So whenever I feel angst, I'm learning right now. I'm in the second week on the job and I'm a coach. I'm constantly telling people, and I just have the voices, right? Oh, why don't I go back to what I was comfortable with? Why did I mess this up? But I know that means I'm learning. Right? I am growing. And there's a coaching exercise of checking in. Well, I used to say your 70-year-old self, but now that's much closer to me, I say like your 100-year-old self. But it's like, what do you want to be saying about your time now? So the whole idea of patience, two things. Humans have drives. At Clearwalk, we do an assessment around measuring people's drives. Some people are driven by more stability. So actually having patience comes more naturally. Others are driven by change and versatility. How, as a leader, do you tap into that, right, for someone and say, hey, let me help you flex here. I know this must be getting challenging for you. And the other thing is teams, right? We talk a lot about teams. Teams, there's a relationship, between me as an individual, self-awareness, us, but then there's actually a team relationship, the dynamic that happens within a team. If you can get intentional as a team and say, look, we have people here that love change. We have other people here that, really are going to be our stabilizing force. Let's lean into one another. Okay, you can actually call that out. This person's going to be our steady force. This person's going to be our disruptor. And then you bring roles to the team so people can flex and try them on. And you actually get the person that's more naturally patient to try the role of the disruptor. What's it like to be the disruptor here? All right, and then there's a force that happens with the team that you don't have to just get individuals to be more flexible, because maybe that's not natural to them, but you have a team that can flex, like breathe in and out and meet the situation. So I think leaning on that team is really important.
I want to talk a little bit about talent and generating talent, growing talent, finding talent, retaining talent, leading fresh talent. What does that mean, and how hard is it for you to find what you're looking for in today's day and age, and what are you looking for?
I think actually finding talent in the life sciences is is challenging. It depends. In academia, there's a certain type of talent that you're looking for. In industry, it's a different talent. But it is challenging to find people that are really motivated and can drive your organization. So the way we've been doing it is, one, you have to build talent. So you have to have an ecosystem that builds talent. That's easy. That's kind of what the job of academia is. So that's core to our mission. A really nice example is, we have a biotech and master's program where students learn about research. They get a master's, they learn research, and they spend time in industry. And they have that opportunity to sort of go back and forth and be the kind of individuals that might populate labs that are starting in Ocean State Labs that Mark might oversee. The other is in recruiting, retaining talent, is making sure that people feel supported, that they have opportunities for growth, and that they are, for lack of a better word, just compensated in an equitable fashion, because otherwise you won't be able to retain them. So those are just some straightforward, I think, things that you have to do to retain talent.
I think we are in a time period where talent is difficult, although I think that's where we as leaders, when we're trying to fill our teams, need to think a little bit out of the box. And, if it's interesting, if we just look and say, well, we need a research and development person, and these are the characteristics and traits that we want in that person, it's going to be very hard maybe to find that particular individual. So I think, one, going out of the comfort zone and maybe bringing somebody in from another industry. It's interesting, a good portion of my background has been in the medical device space. And one of the best engineers that I ever hired was an auto mechanic. And he was an auto mechanic and came in, and he brought a different way to think about things. And so that's one way to deal with the talent issue. I think one of the key traits, though, for me that I like to look for when I'm searching for talent is people that, and we've spoken about it, willing to take a risk, and people that will have the courage and conviction to kind of move forward with what needs to be accomplished, especially in the field of innovation, where there will be, as we spoke, failures. I think it's a little bit of both, of looking differently and then, really speaking with the individuals and trying to be sure that that individual is suited for the role that we want to put him or her into.
It's interesting. I'm going to give you a chance to answer, but it's interesting to hear you talk about struggling to find talent. And I'm guessing that there might be some people on the other side of the aisle who are the people that are looking to find that next job. And you think about, can you go outside of the box when your resume gets put into some AI-generated formula, and if you don't meet all of the qualifications, how do you get a leader to see somebody that's not your stereotypical candidate?
Part of ClearRock's business is outplacement. So we work with, life sciences organizations that have had to reduce their force. And so we work with all the folks asking that same question that have been let go. David talked about the importance of relationship building. I think the leaders, the hiring managers, including their partners in HR, need to be thinking, to your point, below the behaviors and look at the drives and the needs of the people that they want, right? There's assessments to do that, but that's also, what do you need from work here? And can my organization serve that need? What do we need from the person in this role, right? That's what we're looking for. So needs versus behaviors, because behaviors can change. Needs is what drives people's behaviors. And I think the second thing is, when we think about of leadership and talent, I'm going to proselytize for a minute, but I think what we need is to make sure leaders feel set up to be successful by giving them spaces to be vulnerable and to say, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to look for talent. That's a very scary thing to say. But at BCG, where I'm now, they have set up this internal coaching center where actually we have us as trained professional coaches being hired, but we also have an affinity group of BCG employees who wanted to practice their coaching skills that are coaching each other as peers. Right? So it isn't that, and then of course, if you can have your more senior leaders have a safe space to say, I don't even know what I'm looking for as a leader. I don't know, what do I do? The things have changed. So to kind of bridge the two questions together, creating spaces where leaders can say, this is getting in my way, or find out what's getting in my way of being a better leader, a better talent developer, whatever it is, having the safe space and dialogue, and then making sure you're looking beyond the behaviors and into the skills. Into the drives.
I think we want to open it up to some audience questions, unless, did you want to wrap up with anything else, Mark or Mukesh, on this question? No? Okay.
Let's see, yeah.
Let's see what all of you, if there's any questions, maybe just raise your hand and we'll come out and give you an opportunity to ask it.
This question is for Michelle. So when you were talking about pivoting, or the group was talking about pivoting, you recently did a pivot. And so could we learn more about that experience?
I was talking to Mark a little bit about this beforehand, and it was very scary to do that. I spent 20 years in broadcast news and had a very unique role in the state of Rhode Island, one that I loved deeply, with great friends surrounding me. And so it took a lot of courage, and actually 3 years for me to actually, from the first time I told my boss that I was thinking about leaving, to actually walk out the door. But it was a lot of that networking that got me there, and going around to everybody that I knew in all different fields and saying, I'm thinking about making a change. Who can I put? Can you get me in touch with anybody? Tell me what you know, and what can I learn from you? And it was actually my boss now, Joe Peroni, who's the CEO of Delta Dental Rhode Island. He and I served on the board of Make-A-Wish. So one of my stories is always, it's not just about what you can get from others, but what you can give back, and building those relationships while you're giving back to the community that really led to my next chapter. And I said to Jessica today, that first year almost killed me. Things that are common and you can do quickly without thinking, when you make that pivot, just takes so much more time and mental energy to get from point A to point B, but it's really rewarding when you do get there. And so it's been a great experience and a great next chapter for me after leaving a long career.
And by the way, when Dave told me we had Michelle Muscatello moderating, I said to him, it's been 10 years, we finally made it. Because if you don't know Michelle Muscatello in the state of Rhode Island with her work at WPRI, Emmys, etc. And it's not easy to moderate a panel, and you've done an absolutely superb job, and let's give it up for Michelle. That was a perfect segue into that. And we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to briefly wrap, and then there'll be plenty of opportunities as we have the networking session. So if there's another question, I will bring the mic. Okay. Oh, this one went up faster. Right.
Hello, thank you. Mukesh mentioned that there's a time and a moment of being a leader. Can you guys all just touch upon that moment for you guys as to when you had to step into that role, or if you were just thrusted into it? And then also the emotional response of having to step into that role.
So I can start. For me, Mark mentioned I was kind of kind of a pretty focused scientist for many years after I finished my training. And
Amazing scientist, a leading scientist.
I did okay. But the opportunity came about a decade ago, and I thought really hard about it. And the question was, it comes back to something I said earlier, the Jack Welch line. I was building my career, and I was at a moment where, was I ready to pivot? Because it was going to be less about what I wanted to do and more about the organization and the people. And it's a very personal decision, and it was honestly a hard decision. I liked the challenge, because that's just probably for many people in this room, we enjoy challenges. But was it the right time? And I felt, again, a very personal decision that I would continue to do some of the things, but I would scale back on the science, and I would put myself, all of my energies into try to make a difference and impact at a broader level, beyond myself, but for a broader community. And and I've never looked back, and it's been very rewarding in a completely different way than what the reward was previously.
The one thing I would say, in addition to what Mukesh has spoken to very nicely, is that for me personally, I'm still learning as a leader. It's an evolving process, and I'll move on to a new life. Still learning how to be a leader. You never stop learning, and you have to evolve as a leader, and that's critical, and that's part of leadership. I made that transition from being a high-volume clinician and physician to business. That was an incredibly difficult transition with very different skill sets that were needed. And, when I see, for example, some of the discussions that Mukesh and I have with faculty within his university that want to move technology out of the university into the mainstream and build a business, those scientific founders have very different skill sets and need to learn new skills to be able to translate the great science that is done in the academic center into a product. And it's about making a product. But that transition for that founding leader, or the leader in one of the academic labs, to that CEO running a company, is a very different skill set. And, you're just always evolving. One other point, and Michelle, you and I were speaking about this before, and I do want to make it before we close, is that as a leader, you can't expect perfection. If you expect perfection, you'll never survive, because there's no such thing as perfection. The world that we all live in, especially in the field of innovation, academia, is a world of chaos. So when you wake up in the morning, you may say, I'm going to do A, B, or C. And then I get into the office, and there are 6 or 8 other things that I need to do before A, B, and C. And what you need to say is, well, gee, that's just Thursday. That's another day. And Mukesh, I know, happens, we're early risers, and so we speak sometimes at 5, 6 in the morning, and I know he's on to other things, because there's so many things that have happened between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning. So just budget your time like you do your economics, and expect that you're not going to have the time that you normally want, and just accept that.
And I think, a lot of leaders know that, or think they know that they don't need perfection of their teams. I can't expect my teams, but I get to hear those inner voices where they often expect themselves to be perfect. And just to bridge to your question, I think knowing when you want to start to lead for real is when you're ready to get things done through people Okay, but also to not expect yourself to be perfect before you step up and raise your hand. The world is going to have leaders. Why not you? Why not your heart, your values, your voice? Okay, but you're never going to be perfect at it. But are you ready to lead through people to get things done? I would say, if you're like, yeah, I think I am, yeah, raise your hand, and then it's going to be super uncomfortable and exhausting, but a lot of fun and with a lot of impact, I think.
And I think, I forget who it was, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but the saying goes, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. I heard that on an infrastructure project that was causing, you talk about the messy middle, but let's give it up for this panel. Absolutely superb job. Speaks volumes to where we've come as an organization, as a group. I'm just going to say a few points, and then we'll wrap up and we'll get networking. I was taking notes in the back, as I often do over the last 10 years of being through a lot of these sessions. A couple things that stood out to me. Uncertainty is the fertile ground of creativity. Clarity, courage, conviction, trust, control. Clearly, the four of you exhibit those things in spades in your own right, in your own working product and day-to-day. Be true to the purpose. Opportunity for impact. Certainly everything that we've tried to do and we strive for at FountainHead is about achieving impact. Framing of resilience. So we hosted the FountainHead Rhode Island Climate Stocktake in May, and resilience was a huge thematic. It runs the gamut. It's circular in every aspect of life. Think win-win. A lot of times, especially in the world we live in today, it's not about win-win. I was listening to one of my favorite authors, Deepak Chopra, recently, and he talked a lot about he doesn't even want to debate anymore because there isn't a win-win outcome. It's very hard to drive to a consensus and to get the other side to listen, to think thoughtfully and respond in such a manner. And then the last thing I had written down was quality and compliance, and isn't that fitting for the discussion we're having here today on life sciences? And as I've kind of polled and discussed with people as they were coming in, a lot of individuals here are very, very fascinated. They wanted to demystify some of these things. I think the Life Sciences Hub is going to do a world of good for this state. It's going to be a beacon of hope for so many. And people in this room today are going to play a role in the future where that's going to go. So really great talk, and we've recorded it. For those of you that want to share this with your community, you just go to our FountainHead Rhode Island YouTube page. It will be available in the very near future. And of course, one of the key questions you asked, Michelle, about talent and job placement and connections. I always joke with Dave, I wish we had the number over the last 10 years, but I'm sure it's in the hundreds of people that have gotten connected through FountainHead Rhode Island events. And then just by a show of hands, I always like to do this. For how many of you is this your first FountainHead event that you've ever been to? Consistently we're seeing new faces, and we really appreciate that and have a lot of respect, certainly for the community and everybody that shows up. So thank you for being here. Last couple of comments. I just want to say one thing that's fitting because of what happened about a week ago with the passing of Jane Goodall, and I wanted to use this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, and Jane Goodall is someone that I've admired for decades and decades. One of the reasons I founded my climate tech company. She basically said, what you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. And I think that's a fitting way to wrap up this panel today and to highlight different things. And the last thing I'm going to say, because Ernie is here, and we've got a lot of Bryant Bulldogs in the room, Jack Welch actually came and visited Brian and talked about Brian in his book Winning. So we've got two great schools that begin with B, Brown and Brian. So we're really proud of that. And the last thing I'm going to say, December 4th will be our year-end event. Highly encourage you all to attend that year event. It's going to be extra special this year because it commemorates our 10th year of FountainHead Rhode Island. So please check that out on our website. Make sure you register. And without further ado, let's get to the food, the drinks. I don't want to take any food back this year. Circular economy, we don't want to waste anything. So please enjoy the food, enjoy the drinks, enjoy the networking. Thank you all so much for being here.